renorm it and move it back to the center. And that's something that they're supposed to have been doing this summer. So I don't yet have access to that data set, but ultimately, last year was year one of our reading program. It wasn't broadly implemented in the ways that we would like to see it. So it happened very well in certain classrooms. They went really deep in engaging with the new materials, and other people were more resistant. And that caused the places where it was really leaned into, we saw significant increases. And the people who grappled with it, it's a learning experience. So we're going to continue to tighten that up this year. And you'll see that with our kind of change ideas. So last year, go ahead.
Sorry, just to go back. So essentially you're saying what is deemed to be proficient is a moving target.
On this particular assessment, yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen annually, but when they renorm based on student performance, you'll see, we'll talk about that kind of, you'll see a familiar graph soon. And then in math, we had set a goal for 5% increase, so up to 62%. We actually decreased by a single percentage point for math. For us, the challenge with that is cohorts coming in and out of our system. At any given year, we see 100 kids enter and 100 kids leave. So if merely 10 of those kids are on the cusp, then that would sway us by a percentage point. Okay. So these are the actual relative placements. We start with reading. And this is from spring to spring over the last 3 years. So actually our N size over the last 3 years has stayed consistent. Yeah. Okay. Our N sizes have stayed consistent around 981, 982. We've been pretty much on the same path. One thing of note, but again, it's only 2 percentage points increase, is that typically students grades 3+ levels below, those are the types of students that we use this as a metric to qualify for individual education plans. Yes, Lindsay?
Yeah. I just had a question because I think I asked this last time this was, and I don't know, I know Dick was talking about more in depth, but I know this is from the spring, but is there a way once the results come in for like next year, it could also be broken into like grade levels so you can kind of see maybe where we're, you know, is that 3+ grade levels? You do have that. Okay. Is there any way that could be shared at some time?
I don't necessarily see why not. N size is it's a little tough because right now we're looking at 982 kids. So each one of those bars you would see by grade level is like, in some instances, I think we have 82 kindergartners this year. So they start to get a little bit easily swayed by individual results versus like when you have 1,000 kids, it feels a little bit better to present in terms of percentage. But yeah, I mean, we have that data. And we get that.
Yes, along those lines, just anything that, additional, I know when we've had, individual schools as districts, sometimes we had a particular grade that was a sort of an issue, and you kind of wanted to, okay, how are we dealing with that? And I think, maybe sort of from the, we don't necessarily need the tons and tons of data, but, but sort of any important observations from the data, which could be useful for us.
Yeah, we have a half a release day Wednesday, and that's exactly what our grade level teams are doing. The assessment window for this fall closed today. So they're actually going to look at their grade level team performance and then do a little bit of self-reflection on where their kids are now and where they'd like to take them this year. So we can definitely share that out.
We can't hear you. Dick?
You're still muted.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you, but we're not sure why.
Still muted.
It's not showing the mute sign on there, though.
No, his
The
camera's
camera's on. We're seeing him. He was coming in clear before.
Oh, now he's muted. All right, go ahead. No, we still can't hear you. Nothing. Sorry, Dick.
giving up. I
Okay.
like to make it, not to be the, not to be the troublemaker, but you were talking about the fact that we've been doing the reading curriculum for two plus years, and we're doing the math curriculum 1+ years. And the reading curriculum, you've had good success with, do you feel like you're getting good success with those who are practicing it, but not everybody's practicing it? So your results are exactly the same. And that seems strange to me. And then with the math, you're finding that after 1+ years, you've actually gone down. So I'm wondering if maybe what we're gonna find is curriculum change is not going to move the needle.
So I would interpret, so what we've done, right, in leveraging our COVID relief funds to buy curricular programming that leads the industry that underwent like thorough review processes, is implemented them back to back, like one year to the next. So our middle school teams who only are content area specialists and they teach one of those content areas, they're much more likely to be successful with a deeper implementation because they can focus on a singular thing. Whereas our elementary teachers, we ask them to learn a new math program. And typically, like the research bears out, it takes about 3 years to see the benefits of a new curricular resource. So we gave them a new math program because it was essentially a crime of circumstance. We had access to be able to do that. And then we subsequently followed that up next year, last year, with a literacy program. So that's a lot to ask of teachers. So I'm not necessarily sure we'll see the impact for a few more years on its success or failure. People had relative good success early on with math, partly because largely they recognized that the resource that they had previously been using just wasn't meeting their needs. The literacy program, it's a little bit more contentious because of the science of reading and the way that we teach phonemic awareness and the structures of language. It's a political thing. The state just passed Act 139, so we'll talk about that a little bit, around what's required of schools. And some folks philosophically don't necessarily agree with the quote unquote science of reading. So that's where we met some resistance in implementing the new literacy program. But at the same time, like I would be a fool to not recognize that we asked a lot of people. And I think that is one of the reasons why we maybe had a slow start.
Lindsay's got her hand up.
Lindsay.
Sorry, one more question. I just wonder, too, with a lot of these tests being done on the computers, do you allow for students that maybe don't have the focus to do it computers to do it a different way, or does it have to be done online or however?
So yeah, that's a great question. So both iReady and Vermont Comprehensive Assessment Program, Cognia, are computer adaptive. So there are no paper forms. There, in rare instances, you can get a paper form for the Vermont Comprehensive Assessment. But in terms of iReady, it's designed to figure out a student's ceiling. So in terms of what computer adaptive means, it means that if you get a certain number of questions correct in a row, the difficulty of the next question will be higher. And then if you get that question correct, then the difficulty will ramp up again until eventually it levels you out at your ceiling. So by design, it can't be paper-based. That being said, I actually spoke to a couple of principals earlier this week around students who this is just not working for them. So in that instance, we come up with other local paper-based measures that we can use to get a sense of where a student is. It doesn't give us the benefit of holding it up against the performance of like a national norm group, but it does give us important information. So go ahead.
I would also add that students who qualify for special education services, their individualized education plan or IEP teams determine what testing accommodations a student needs, both in like day-to-day performance with the curriculum as well as on state tests and iReady. So if students require assistance or supports or breaks or movement or any of those types of things that can, essentially remove barriers to access, then the IEP team can write that into the student's plan. So, and sometimes there are things like a scribe or text to speech or speech to text that are accommodations that the IEP team could determine as well. So that's just another whole kind of aspect of the testing experience designed to make sure kids have access.
So this is placements from spring to spring. So these are our 3 years worth of comparative of our own data against itself. And then we are also provided with the national norm group from 1819, which they use as a reference point because it's prior to the COVID. And then national year to date, which would be the spring. And you can see the national year to date population for reading is 8.2 million students between March and June 15th. So we fare relatively well against those 8.2 million students. And we are actually outpacing the national norm prior to COVID as well in the area of reading. Okay. So what's up next is the same two visualizations for math. So as I mentioned before, we did see a slight decrease in mathematics performance. And that's represented here over our last 3 years. You can see we saw relatively significant growth from 21-22 to 22-23. And then against the national norm for mathematics, we are significantly better than the year-to-date group of 9.5 million students. We are not quite where the national norm was in spring of 1819. So mathematics, I don't know if you recall, I certainly do. Throughout COVID, we saw the biggest decreases in math. We saw much less so in reading because parents knew to have their children read at home. It's pretty valued. I can't say that math gets the same space at home. In fact, all of I was a math teacher during the Common Core's implementation in Common Core math. So I love it. So my kids are great. But my friends' children and their parents, they don't like the new math. I actually went to an open house last week for my own kids, and I heard parents complain about new math. So that was kind of ostracized during COVID. Math scores went down significantly, and we're still recovering. Okay. So what does it all mean? In addition to that academic performance based on that evidence-based assessment, we can think about maybe why didn't we see some growth? What other indicators would explain some of the absence of growth or student performance, right? So absenteeism is a data point that I know is important to all of us. And at one point we reached a high in 2021, there was like 8% of our students had missed 30 plus days of school, which is insane. Mm-hmm. Last year, we got it back down to 3%, or sorry, in 22-23, it was down to 3%. It's back up to 4%. Pre-COVID, it was less than 1% of our students missed 30 plus days. So we're still grappling with kids being in school. And of course, if kids aren't in school, then the learning we expect to take place doesn't necessarily happen. Okay. Equity is also a value of our organization. So I had parsed out, disaggregated some data. Students from historically marginalized populations, in this case by race, the N size of this group would be 73 kids compared to 918 kids non-historically marginalized. The reason that they don't add up to our total enrollment numbers is because some of the historically marginalized categories include two or more races, and they can be like Hispanic is often overlapped with some other ethnic groups in terms of data collection. So we saw non-historically marginalized populations have 13% more students proficient in math, and we saw 7% more non-historically marginalized students proficient in ELA. So those are what we define as equity gaps.
Wait, the historically marginalized was 13%. Wait, give me that again.
Yes.
Sorry.
There were 13% fewer historically marginalized students performing proficient. So the gap between the two was non-historically marginalized was 13% higher in terms of performance. So take what you will from that with the N size the way that it is. But it is a gap that has existed in our system since we've known about it for a while, but it really reared its head during the equity audit. Yeah. So like I mentioned before, when David had asked the question, we were in year 1 last year of ELA, and we were in year 2 of mathematics. The different philosophical approach to the science of reading met some resistance among our staff. Well, it was kind of variable. It really depended on the person. If they were open to the new approach, if they believed in the new approach. And now we have to do that because Act 139 tells us we have to. We have to approach reading in a very structured way. So we were ahead of the curve in program adoption because our program puts us in the position to be able to do that. Also, something that significantly impacted our ability to get people on the same page and implement and lean on each other and collaborate across buildings. This one was kind of an interesting construct that I don't think we anticipated at all. With our shift to a more equitable GISP model, people lost horizontal team time or they lost professional development time in their buildings. So when they lost professional development time in their buildings, because kids would typically leave and they would go to the mountain or the skating rink, that would be half days of PD time at the building. So recognizing the importance of building-based professional development, we had actually given back some of our SU PD time to the principals to have their teachers in-house. So in doing so, that took away from us the ability to get all of our 5th grade teachers together to unpack the curriculum and work together. And that was just the cost of more equitable GIST opportunities. This year, we have hedged our bets against that, and we have built-in horizontal team time, the second of which will be on Wednesday of this week.
These teachers use that time to go to the mountain or the skating rink? Or
This past year, yes.
Right.
That's what they did. And in previous years, kids would go and the teachers would
Sure.
stay at the building.
Yeah. Right.
Now, going back just quick to Act 139,
Yes.
is that, I always get a little afraid when, legislators are trying to define what should be taught in schools. Is that a relatively benign one, or is it not?
It's pretty significant.
Yeah.
But it is aligned with what
We're doing.
we're doing and what we think is best, what the research and experience and evidence shows is best for students to learn how to read. So that's, I think it's important, and I'm not surprised at all. Many states already have legislation around science of reading and screening kids early, intervening early to prevent achievement gaps. So Vermont jumping on board with this is not surprising at all. There's nothing that I look at that's hugely concerning to me that's in that legislation.
I was worried about when they start defining things, then 5 years from now, it could end up, whatever they forcing us to do might be the worst thing in the world.
Right. Yeah, I don't think this is that.
I don't
No,
either.
it's not that, okay.
Yeah.
Not at all.
It actually has implications for teacher preparatory programs as well. So that
More
means that
conceptual.
Yeah. it does require certain systems of alert to parents and communication routes that we have to establish and prove. So that's always good to have more obligation to communicate with parents if their kid isn't meeting a benchmark or a screener. I'll talk about that a little bit because like Dick had alluded to, this is iReady. It doesn't really give us kind of the nitty gritty in a way that the rest of our local assessment plan will, which is now aligned across our system for the first time that in the last 8 years, at least, that I've been here. Yes.
Maybe you're going to get to this, but the absence of horizontal team time due to GISP actually has a trade-off because your other goals, your safe and healthy goals include social emotional health, physical well-being, physical environment. I would think that hopefully the GISP had an impact in those areas that hopefully is somehow quantifiable. Is that possible?
Yeah. We will, when we get to that, we'll look at the tool that we use to
Oh, okay.
measure those things. Yeah. Okay, so this year's goal, we moved it a little bit because whenever you're talking about performance and achieving proficiency, you're really talking about a student where that's within reach, right? So this year I looked at annual typical growth, which is a metric that is used by iReady. Essentially, they take the biological age of a student and they pull out all of their data sets and they say kids that are the same biological age typically the average student at that age performs here or grows this amount. And that is a projection for every student. So regardless of where you actually perform, it is a projected growth. That is like, in this academic year, you should grow this much, and that number is based on historical data of peers. So I felt like that was a much more relevant in terms of every student has the ability to be successful and grow. Whereas some students who are starting way below proficiency, it's not necessarily actionable to get them to proficiency in the school year. So we shifted that metric. And students growing less than a typical growth are demonstrating below average growth. Students growing more are demonstrating above average growth. So again, the bell curve concept where the median is the point of reference. Okay. So how are we going to get there? Deeper implementation of programming. We have.
Is that, so that's the 24, 25
Yes.
now.
This is what we're doing this year.
This year.
Okay, so we're kind of dropping the old measurement and going strictly with growth.
Yes.
Okay.
So what does it mean for this year? It means deeper implementation of programming. We've built in our curriculum-based assessments as part of our local assessment plan that every teacher is able and supposed to conduct on specific timelines. We have data collection periods, the first of which just closed today. They started September 9th and it closed today. So we have a way to gather all of that data into an aggregator and create a student profile of multiple measures in ways that we haven't had in the past. It's kind of exciting. I'm certain that we'll break it in some way and have to figure out how to fix it, but it's a lot. It pulls in attendance, behavior, both reading and writing goals. There's you can run interventions from it. EduClimber, you've heard it at these meetings before. It is now way more functional than it ever has been. So in addition to that data aggregator, we also have year-round collaborative opportunities. We have strategically designed our year-long PD to have touch points with grade level teams every single time we get together, every opportunity we have. So that they can talk about how to find their way through the new programming in an efficient way instead of everybody going off and doing their own thing and making their own mistakes. They can learn from each other. Streamlined assessments, I was just referencing that. Less assessments with tighter windows. So I know, and I've heard at these meetings, we at one point discussed the amount of time we spend assessing kids versus the amount of time kids spend learning. I certainly take that to heart. No one likes giving a test, but tests are necessary to help us understand kids and learning and where they're going. So we really.
So when you gave us the amount of time, it turned out to be a lot less than a lot of us thought was being spent testing.
Yeah. When you do it minute by minute and you think about how many minutes in a school year students spend testing versus how many minutes in a school year students spend transitioning to recess or whatever, the bang for your buck of a test, it's certainly ours. We had a team of people develop the local assessment inventory, which included administrators, teachers, instructional coaches, department chairs. Folks were really intentional how to get the biggest bang for their buck, because sometimes as a teacher, it can feel like a month has gone to testing, when the reality is we're trying to do this as efficiently as possible. iReady is a great test for that, because if a kid flags as in need of additional assessment, then we do that, and it's very micro assessment, versus kids that don't flag, and then we say, okay, they're good till the next round.
That's where, I think so many of us have heard so much about, all the testing, and it starts to be like how many weeks, and it was more like how many hours are spent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That, it was on a whole different scale than I think
Right.
what a lot of us thought.
Yeah, and for the computer-based measures that you actually get a time, it tells you how long a kid took the test as well, because it flags if a kid rushes through it. So if they go too quickly, it's 2025, so we should have these things in place. So EduClimber is, again, that data warehouse where we pull in all of our computer-based assessment stuff. It automates and populates on a student profile. Our local assessment system, we have teachers conducting paper-based assessments, handing it off to the school interventionist. The school interventionist enters it into EduClimber where it lives on the student profile. This year, we also got interventionists together and identified program-specific interventions. So they did a bunch of review, just like we did for our larger scale curricular purchases. around programs designed to function as intervention. So it's specially designed instruction to be, the student is low in this particular mathematical domain. Here's a very targeted set of skills and materials. And that's what we have our interventionists doing. Also this year, our interventionists largely at the elementary level were reading interventionists, reading specialists. This year, we've shifted their roles to not only help with reading, but also help with mathematics. So that was a challenge for them to understand the need for it, but we've trained them well and provided them with great resources to be able to do that. And they're well positioned right now since the window just ended. This week is the week that everybody looks at all the assessment results and they start making intervention plans. Whereas previously, you're looking at mid to late October before that would happen, or we would have assessment data that was conducted in May that people would start the school year with. So it's 6 months ago, or not 6 months ago, but you get the picture, it's kind of stale. And the summer slide was not taken into account. So I'll keep things moving, I know I have time. So horizontal team time, I mentioned that already. We are going full bore into our Inquiry Journeys resource, which is our elementary social studies programming, which is focused on inquiry-based learning and projects at the elementary level. Our 7th and 8th grade teams for social studies got together this summer and identified a resource that they're all collectively using called Civics Alive. So we purchased those resources for them. They got aligned. They now also are doing some work with atlases with the hopes of bringing back a BRSU GOV, where the schools compete against each other in geometry, or not geometry, geography, sorry. And then, of course, we have worked with our principals this summer to talk about administrative walkthroughs to make sure the curriculum is being implemented as it's intended. And we continue to support them pretty much once a week. Either Randy meets with them or I meet with them, and we keep things moving. Okay, EduClimber I mentioned, capstone, still a thing. This summer, we got our middle school teachers together. They worked on integrating project-based learning principles into already existing units. Because when we introduced the capstone, many of them felt like it's okay, that is that over there. Here's my main job of teaching this content. So in an effort to kind of incorporate that into what our goals are, into what we want kids to be able to do, we held a 4-day summer institute this summer led by our middle school instructional coach, Tracy Zano. And it had a good turnout, like 6 or 7 teachers showed up and built projects out of their content, which is what we were hoping for. Structured literacy, I mentioned that. Benefits-based accountability is here. I also have met multiple times with a cohort of our parent-teacher organizations across all schools and talked about shared resources. Because in a lot of ways, like last year with the One District, One Book thing, we saw a lot happening at Manchester. We didn't necessarily see that same type of community-based event happening at other schools around the Wild Robot. Although they are all going to see the movie next week.
Are they all going this week?
I
I don't know all the dates.
I think Courier might be going the following week because they're going to go to Springfield instead of Bennington. Okay. So this transitions us into the social emotional learning. We're really looking for an increased sense of belonging, positive peer relationships, positive school culture, student surveys, and interviews. Our main tool that we used was the family engagement, or a family survey for school climate. This year, we also used the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment Mini, so it was significantly shorter than the full length. And essentially, it's a screening tool used by teachers to identify social emotional strengths and needs in kids. It's an 8-question assessment. It measures the 8 domains of social emotional wellness. It produces a single score. If a student flags on that, they then go to a more smaller grain size of an assessment of skills. It takes about 1 to 2 minutes per student to complete. So essentially, it's a reflection. I'll show you an example of what that sheet looks like. You can read those. So it's a 4-point scale, theoretically 5 because there's a never. And it's simple statements that the teacher considers a kid and marks them off on the scale. So number 1 says accepts in the last 4 weeks, how often did the child accept responsibility for what they did? You know, it's basically social skills. Do something nice for somebody, speak about positive things, pay attention, contribute to group efforts. perform the steps of a task in order, show care when doing project or schoolwork. So every student in our system has their adult, after 4 weeks, reflect on if they've seen these actions. Go ahead, Lindsay.
If you doing this see that there is a kid that has like a rarely or a never, are these results shared with the parents so that we can collaborate with the parents to, you know, help the student, or are these just for the teacher and school use?
Yeah, so when that happens, it may or may not trigger like a lower T score, which is the total score of the combined questionnaire. Essentially, if something like that flags, they then go to the full DESA assessment, which is 72 of these statements, to really get at if there is an actual issue or not. And if there is, then yes, certainly it would stimulate a conversation around like, how can we best support this kiddo? Essentially, it is a screening tool. So most kids, it's filled out. I can actually show you the results. I'll show you the results. And that will explain that a little bit more further. So we had varying degrees of implementation here. Obviously, you know, we have around 980 students. This was conducted on about 600 kids in the fall. Getting people to do things at the same time at 6 different schools is kind of a challenge. We're working on that. We're getting better. In the fall, 68% of that 600 kid population scored in the typical range, which means they're our average kid in terms of social and emotional well-being at any given grade level. 20% were identified as a strength, so that likely means that it's always down the line. You know, they always demonstrate kindness, etc. And then about 12% of our kids flagged as in need of instruction. In all likelihood, those students, it would probably be a rarity to have a kid flag here that wasn't already on someone's radar already, because it is an observational assessment. So teachers usually talk about kids that they notice, not necessarily showing, you know, age-appropriate norms. So we did conduct this again in the fall, or sorry, in the spring. What this system does is it provides a series of lessons for the students in need of instruction. And then the teacher and or the school counselor can take a look at those and determine, you know, how relevant they are and if students should engage in that learning. This is the same 600 student data set across all 6 schools. Percentages went down for in need of instruction, strengths went up, typical went down, because those kids that were typical now landed in the strengths category. Okay. Brand new tool for last year. Our school counselors are continuing to learn about it as we use it. They're meeting on Wednesday as well to talk about this data. This is the school climate survey that we did in May. This is compared to last year. We had 155 responses in 23. In 24, we had 180 unique responses. So that's nice to see that we're getting more feedback from families. It's 21 questions on a 4-point Likert scale. The same most negatively associated question exists this year as it did last year, and as I frequently volunteer to help on special projects at my students' school, in my communication with our PTOs, that rang true. They said they don't feel like there's an opportunity to be in school as much as they would like. So that's feedback I bring to our principals, and subsequently we talk to teachers about how to bridge that relationship. Additional negative associations: fair treatment of students, consistent enforcement of rules, staff communication, fairness of school rules. Manchester has really done a great job of addressing the rules conversation. They've developed a code of conduct that they shared with their families in the opening week of school. Students have it, staff have it. It's all about behavioral response and being consistent and following through. And thus far, they've had great success this year. So I'm hoping that those scores rise a little bit, more positive associations. Fairness. Okay. We did still see peer relationships from kids. Like, peer relationships is still a challenge. And that is something that we hope to address directly with our social emotional learning curriculum. We also put 38 educators in a 4-day responsive classroom training this summer in August before the school year started. There's a middle level class and an elementary class. And we had representation from all 6 schools there. The trainer is actually coming the second week in October to do follow-up visits at schools to talk about how they're using responsive classroom. So it's things like morning meeting, restorative circles, those types of community-based conflict management. Okay. So this year, we're continuing to try to improve student sense of belonging. We're using PBIS surveys, the DESA Mini. We have our Love Inclusion Trust teams that we started last year that we're going to continue to move forward. Like I said, we're going to refine the DESA Mini and its use. Continue to work with Jamila Adams, who brought that model to us last year. And then continuing to communicate with community stakeholders and reposition our schools as community hubs. That's my work with the PTO, trying to think about ways like the Wild Robot to bring people in. And that is all I have for you.
Great. I appreciate it. Other questions, thoughts? All right. No, dude, definitely, it's always, definitely, I know I value, I think board members value having better sense of what's going on.
There's
Instead
a
of
lot
talking
of
about
work
just board
happening.
stuff.
Definitely a lot of work.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Skylar, for everything. And
Okay. So now, on to, quick, we have on here, we put on the TNG reconfiguration, just, it's TNG is going through a lot now and it's getting a lot of attention, in communities. A question came up earlier about, community engagement, and that's gonna be going. That is just Taconic and Green, but it impacts all of us in every one of our districts. As TNG, is looking at a very significant shift in the way, potentially a shift in the way that we handle education. It's great that our communities are very interested and want to engage with that. But if we have to figure out how to make changes that are going to be in the best interests of our kids and our families and are going to be acceptable to our communities as well. So trying to factor that all in. So in your package is the presentation that Randy presented in our first community engagement meeting that wasn't planned to be a community engagement meeting, but in Sunderland. And so the Taconic and Green, as we said earlier, Dick mentioned. Can we hear you now, Dick? Okay, good deal. Dick was mentioning earlier that the community engagement committee met and figuring out how to reach out to all the other communities, but just wanted to, include this, and I'll pass it over to Randy, but I think it's important for all of us, when our communities are engaging and, all of our kids in, we have Winhall kids, we have Meadowy kids in our other grades who would be impacted by this. The thing that really got all this started was the fact that we weren't doing middle school as well as we should, and we've been talking for years about how to do that better, and that impacts all of our kids, all of our districts. So, we went from how do we do middle school better to, then if we change that whole structure, then what's the impact going to be on the rest of our, on the rest of our grades? So I'll kick it over to Randy now, if you want to, did you want to?
yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of comments. I do think that that it is important for all of the boards to know what's happening with Taconic and Green. I think it's both Meadowy and Winhall have a vested interest in sort of understanding what's happening with Taconic and Green. Lindsay and I are both sitting on this community engagement committee, and Lindsay, I'll make a couple comments, but turn it over to you if there's anything you want to say. Like the committee is going to be making very specific recommendations to the TNG board next week. I've got a letter written. They'll probably go out first thing tomorrow morning to families, letting them know that next week is a regular Taconic and Green board meeting. It's not a community engagement forum, and that the committee will be recommending a series of community engagements forums for the board to hear from every community. And if that's approved, then we'll move forward with those dates. But there's, as we know, a lot of work happening this time of the year and with the upcoming budget cycle and, the presentations of our schools next week, we really, ultimately realize the board has a lot of other work to do as well. So let's kind of separate out that community engagement piece. I think there's a lot of listening to do, a lot of information sharing. My hope is that we can get a lot of folks in the community really willing to partner with us, to be thinking through how do we provide the best, most stable and effective educational model we can for all of our kids. I firmly believe that the more ideas we have together, the better the outcome will be. I've not hesitated at all about the fact that I feel like we can be doing better with our middle schoolers, and that, it's tough for us to really provide the most robust elementary experience given the number of schools we've got right now. So how might we address all of those needs to do a better job for everyone? So we'll see, but I'll continue. I think, it's probably through the BRSU board will keep the other districts just up to date. And I encourage Winhall and Meadowy to, watch a meeting. We'll keep you updated, but keep checking in on the BRSU website for updated information. I don't know, Lindsay, if you have anything else to add.
The only thing I wanted to would add was that when the committee met, it really does seem like the TNG really does want to hear this information from the community. And I think it's really important. And I know for myself, it will help with whatever decision we make. So I really hope that as many board members will be able to, feel the same way I will, and the community will feel that the board is listening. So hopefully that gets, portrayed from what we're trying to do, but it does seem like we're going to be doing a lot of work, but I think that the work is beneficial to what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, because I mean, the whole focus is to do education better for our kids.
Right.
And, and I think we've identified for a while, and Randy's been kicking us board members for a while, telling us that, our middle school is our real weakness right now. So we need to take some steps there. And honestly, that's why we had a middle school committee discussing, gee, how do we redo, getting the research in and bringing in some experts. How do we do this better? And then as it got to it was sort of, we probably should have realized much earlier, but honestly, you once you start to say, okay, if we reconfigure, if we pull all of our middle school kids together, then that's impacting every school. It is having a significant impact. We just have to understand, we have to do our best to make sure that if we fix the middle school, that we're also doing as well or better for our kids, younger kids. But change is never easy, and we all know that. So yeah, I wanted to make sure that all of our districts are tied into this and aware of what's going on, and take part, because it's if you care about, you're sitting on the Meadowy board and you care about what's going on there, you care about what's happening to the kids and all the other grades as well. So, any other thoughts out there, Dick, or anything? Go ahead. Dick? Yeah.
I
Uh-oh.
still can't hear you.
You're still a quiet man.
And I know that's not the truth. Sorry, Dick.
Lindsay?
Also, too, if the other districts do attend or watch the videos, I think if they might have some things that they've seen that's worked in their community forums or in dealing with the public, the community engagement committee probably would like to just hear some of that also as well.
Yeah.
And you can reach out to me directly and I can get that to the committee if
Yeah.
you're not sure who's on that.
And I'll kind of say to the community engagement committee, I sent an email to some of you folks, but, you know, we've also have interest at the individual community level in potentially having discussions. And, you know, just, which I think could be great, but also at the same time, we don't want to be speaking in too many different places and potentially working across purposes. So, you know, I think all of us probably need some direction as to how we can engage with our, you know, own smaller communities to ensure. I think it would be great to be able to answer questions and all. You know, we don't have any solutions, but if are trying to hold those, if, you know, David and I being from Dorset, if we held a meeting at the Dorset School with Dorset parents, is that actually going to be more confusing than it is helpful? I don't know.
Well, you'll hear the recommendation from the community engagement committee and hopefully that
Good deal.
helps.
All right, great. Okay, moving on to much more boring business. Okay, this is it. You know, hopefully we've got some people signed up to go to the Vermont School Board Association annual conference. We have the annual conference and the business meeting happening in October. I'll be there, and if any of other, Randy's going to be there. David. I don't know, Lindsay, I think maybe, or I don't know who all signed up for it, but we have a number of us going, which is great. It can be, you know, a good learning experience. But when I said on the more boring side, it's the business meeting every year of the Vermont School Board Association. They consider different resolutions that guide the business of the VSBA. There's a whole set of resolutions available on the VSBA website that have been put together over the years. And every year, a certain resolution, or every district has the ability to propose a new resolution that would guide the business. We actually had a resolution a couple of years ago that we presented, and it got approved and included. It is now included in the VSBA resolutions that define its work. This year, in your package, there were 2 resolutions put forward by specific school districts, SUs, and then 3 other resolutions that were put together or put forward by the resolutions committee itself. The resolutions committee is, you know, essentially half of the VSBA board. They sit together and they take a look at all the resolutions that come in and what they think it might make sense to add to the sort of rules that, you know, to guide the organization. And what happens at the annual meeting is every resolution that has been proposed actually gets voted on. The board in it, the VSBA board in advance has you know, looked at those resolutions and either come up with a recommendation to pass it, to not pass it, or just takes a neutral position on those resolutions. But each resolution that gets proposed, even if it has a do not pass on it, still would get put up to vote. And for it to become a resolution of the VSBA, it requires 60% vote at the annual meeting. Each supervisory union gets 1 vote at that meeting. And so one thing I'm proposing is that we need somebody to act as our voting person.
Meta, we already voted.
Meta, we already voted? Okay.
Right.
Well, because Melanie Virgilio,
That's who they voted for.
I suggested Melanie and I are the two representatives on, David's done the vote before. I'm also an officer of the VSBA, so I have to sit up in front of the meeting at the main table, so it's really stupid for me to be the voting person, I think. And, so, David's done it before when he and I were the team up at the VSBA, and now that Melanie and I are, I think Melanie's a good person, so I'd take a motion to approve Melanie as the voting, to put our votes out there. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second? Lindsay, I see? Yep, okay. Any discussion on that? Somebody else want to do it so badly? Okay, noted. So all in favor of Melanie casting our votes for our supervisory union, please raise your hand. Okay, anybody not in favor of that? Or abstaining? No, that was unanimous. Okay. Now, the resolutions are included in here. And, one of the reasons is to, allow, if there are any questions you guys have tonight, I don't want to spend a lot of time on those. If you have questions, the meeting is October 25th or 24th or 25th. I think it
Something
is.
like that.
And, and this meeting, it's all virtual, so everybody can come.
25th.
Anybody can speak at it, but, we only have one person who's voting. So one of the important things is if you guys all take a look through these resolutions, and if something strikes you as, oh my gosh, why would we ever want that, or, whatever, then speak up and make sure, what I'd ask you to do is share any thoughts certainly with Melanie, also me, because I'm the other representative for the Bennington region. If you want to share it with the whole board, you can just shoot out your ideas. We can't get into a discussion on that over email, but if you have some questions or some real thoughts on them, then feel free to raise them.
Can you explain,
yeah.
what the various things are? I get the take no position, but what is the pass as a continuing resolution? Does that mean it becomes permanent?
That it becomes permanent until we decide there are continuing resolutions, and then there are the sort of annual resolutions. Some of the things we pass and just say, okay, that's in place for a year. We expect it to go away unless we think it's still relevant. Continuing resolutions are expected to stay in place and at least until they're accomplished. So you'll see we pulled some things off of, there was a list of changes to resolutions, and some resolutions get repealed because you actually accomplished it. One was, for a while, I think, looking at a better way of, anyway, when you've accomplished it, then it doesn't make any sense having it there as a to-do anymore. So, so continuing resolution is the expectation that it's going to be on there for more than a year. The take no position. Now, an interesting one, the very first one, the Norwich School District, this was on there, just to give an example. They had noted Norwich is a wealthy town that when we did the new people waiting, they got hurt and had, significant increase in their tax rates. They end up, our tax system is, each town ends up getting its own, tax rates, which are, the tax rate for the district adjusted by the CLA for the town. So each town is its own, homestead tax rate. But the non-homestead tax rate, which covers, like second homes and businesses, is one rate that's set across the entire state. So that's just, one rate. Norwich has had their homestead tax rate go way, way up. And so they started noticing that, well, gee, now the non-homestead tax rate, so second second homeowners in Norwich are getting a much lower tax rate than people who are full timers.
Yeah, it's like Win Hall, right, Dean?
Yeah.
He's going, yep.
So their suggestion was to change, you know, if a town's homestead rate is above its non-homestead rate, then you should adjust it to the homestead rate. That's sort of, you know, it's a nice concept, but it also totally redoes the way we do our, because then you've got, are you going to charge businesses that way? Since businesses, that's their tax rate too? Or, you know, how you're going to accomplish that is sort of a question. Interestingly, Norwich brought this up last year. They proposed it, and the VSBA board took a position, do not pass this resolution, because we thought that it was, you know, was required a total rewrite of the tax structure, which didn't make much sense. This year, the resolution committee said, yeah, well, go ahead. We'll, you know, go ahead and pass it, and we'll put it into our to-do list.
Aren't many folks calling for a total rewrite anyway? I mean, so this would be like the time to do it.
Well, it's a good point. That's and there is the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont, which is charged with figuring out whether we should change a lot of stuff.
Right.
So this could be, you know, an item that's run into the hopper. Yeah.
Because it does kind of run against the grain to have non-residents pay lower than than the full-time residents, like, right?
But it's also,
Yeah.
it's understandable. It's understandable the feelings and all, but at the same time, you know, the districts that have a higher homestead tax rate than the non-homestead, that probably changes every year. And the tax rate for the district changes. Like with Dean, with Winall, you guys have been on both sides of it, right?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I had my mic muted for so long I wasn't sure if it was going to turn on again. Yeah, I mean, we've been on both sides of it. I don't know. We're kind of like watching in horror right now with everything that's going on at the state level. So, you know,
Okay.
I feel like we're probably on the wrong side of it more often than we're on the right side of it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But that might be, so anyway, if you guys have input on, you know, something like that, the next one, take no position, is actually, this was just telling the Agency of Education to ask the districts a little bit more when they're collecting information. You know, it's two things. One, the information the Agency of Education puts together and then presents through their snapshot and all that stuff. One, it's like the information ought to be accurate, and it isn't now. Another point, the point that's specifically being presented right now is you should ask the districts, you know, you should get the input from the districts on how much time and effort and what data is useful for the districts, instead of, you know, having a top-down process for the data collection. The other points, you know, artificial intelligence, cell phones in schools, those are both, things are happening. We ought to have some policies and procedures. The last one, the Secretary of Education, that was, since there was a lot of to do when we hired the current interim secretary, this was to say that whoever gets hired ought to have more experience in the schools. So those are the points. If people have input, pass it along.
I'm just curious, and you may have mentioned this earlier and I might have missed it. Like, does the VSBA have a position on this, the commission to unscrew up the things that the last commission screwed up that they're having right now?
The VSBA has a role on has a, sort of an advisory role on the commission. Along with most of the other, organizations there. The commission itself is set up, it's legislators and, and a whole bunch of other, luckily it got set up with a good wide range of membership, but they were asked to partner with all of the organizations that are involved with education in the state. That would include the Superintendent's Association, the School Boards Association, the school board, or the school business managers, et cetera. So all those folks are, I will guarantee you that the VSBA is watching it like a hawk, and I think every organization is, to try to make sure they're on top of what's going on. We'll try to, over the course of the year, keep our local boards updated on what's going on with the commission. At this point, they're still getting their legs sort of under themselves. They happily they agreed on a sort of general statement of what they're trying to accomplish, other than what they're legislatively required to accomplish, which is by the end of this year to come up with some short-term ideas on how to improve education and finance, and then on the longer term, by the end of 2025, to be able to come up with additional recommendations. They came up with a general statement, and from our perspective, as in our districts, we're kind of a special needs district in that we have a different structure than other people in that we don't operate a high school. And so they're on the commission. One of the members represents the Vermont Independent Schools Association, and that person is Oliver Olson, who we know pretty well. And Oliver has been doing a good job of ensuring that people don't forget that independent schools can be a part of a school system like ours. That's probably more than you were asking, but yeah, Lindsay.
I just have and I was just looking through the resolution, so it popped in my head. But the 10 hours to pre-K, is that district decision or is that a state um uh act or policy? Because I there was something with that when I was seeing that resolution. So
10 hours is what the state decided they'd pay for, which we do 20 hours, right?
Yep.
And then and that's definitely something that is, out there for discussion with the commission and everything else.
because
That's
I've been seeing a lot of parents, not just in this district, but like outside the district, who said that like if they do the pre-K through a daycare or whatnot, that the school the rates that they're paying have gone up. The amount that is becoming that's being paid for those hours. So technically, their tuition or their daycare cost or whatever you want to call it is going up by the same amount that it would have been without those 10 hours. Am I making sense? So if they get 10 hours, all the daycare is doing is now adding that 10 hours on top of what the weekly charge is, so that the parents are still paying the same price. So it was just something when I saw pre-K, I didn't know if that was something I could just put a bug in your ear. Maybe, when the pre-K topic comes up, with that resolution, that's something also.
That's something Randy needs to know locally, because
Yeah, I don't know. So essentially you feel the feedback from parents is that the private providers are like double dipping. They're
Well,
taking the money from the state and charging the parents for that time.
Well, I guess it's not just the district. So I don't want you to think it's just here. It's, outside too. But, you're thinking when your child gets to preschool age that your tuition or your weekly charge is going to go down because you're getting those 10 hours now funded from the state.
Right.
And instead, what's happening when you get to that age, they're now raising the rate for that age, so that the parents are not seeing that relief for that 10 hours. I don't know if I'm making sense what I'm trying to
Lindsay, why
say.
don't you just reach out to, if you reach out to me, I'll connect you with our early ed director and I can have her look into it a little bit. Just
Okay.
to better understand, you can give her more details, but if, between the two of us, let's just try to connect so I can connect you with her, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, because my understanding is that, you know, the state paid for 10 hours, so that was supposed to pretty much cover 10 hours at private providers or wherever. And then, you know, we said that's not enough, so we provided an extra 10 hours of paid. And then if parents wanted to go beyond that, then that's on them. But, you know, most districts in the state, I think, just still provide the 10 hours, you know, 10 hours, which should buy 10 hours of pre-K.
And is that just 3 and 4-year-olds or just 4-year-olds?
4-year-olds.
The additional 10 hours is only for 4-year-olds.
So 3-year-olds
The
get
state pays
10?
10 for 3, yeah.
That's,
State pays,
We pay it.
what,
We pay the 10. The state doesn't pay
for
it.
3-year-olds?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
We pay it. The state requires us to, but it's us paying for
Sorry.
it.
This is a classic problem where
Sorry.
people always,
I was, yes. It was not coming out correctly. What I was trying to say is that parents are not
Not
supposed to
supposed to
pay
be
it.
paying for it, yeah.
So, and then 20 hours for the 4-year-olds.
yeah, a lot of people in Montpelier tend to think that if the school districts are paying it,
That
it's
they're paying
free.
for it, yeah, exactly.
Okay, Dick, did you have a comment? You did?
I was just wondering if you can now hear me.
Yes.
Okay, switch computers.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you do the VI?
So one other piece of business here, we've got, there's also the meeting of the Vermont School Boards Insurance Trust and Vermont Education Health Initiative are two insurance entities that provide us with health insurance for our employees and with property and casualty insurance for our buildings and stuff. They're having their annual meeting basically at the same time. It's 8:15, the morning of the 25th, I think. I've been to their meetings. They tend to be pretty short. You know, the year before last, I was the only person to ask a question. Last year I didn't go, but I may go this year. But what I'd like to get is the approval just to. I feel totally confident with us giving them our proxy to vote. It's a good organization. It's run by some very good people who. You know, have our best interests at heart.
Mhm.
So what I asked for is an approval to give VHI and Visbit our proxies for their annual meeting vote.
So moved.
Dean voted, and second? Okay, Alex? Okay, any questions? Nope, all in favor, raise your hand, make a sign. Okay, that looks like everybody, good. Thank you. And now it's time for executive session. So if I could actually get a motion from somebody.
So I make a motion to go into executive session as per Title I, VSA, Section 313, Article 1, Subclause 3, I guess. That's what it is.
Let me get on this stuff.
Okay, do I have a second on that? Julie? Okay, so everybody else, appreciate your attending.
Hold on, don't get off until I
Yep.
get it logged on.
No, I won't go out.
Okay,
I'm just gonna stop recording.
Okay. If you can make me a co-host. Yep. Sorry.
No, that's okay. All right, I'm stopping recording and let me make you a co-host.
thanks, Skylar.
Thank you.
Bye, have a good night.
See you next
I'll let
week.
you know about, tomorrow night.
Okay,
Yeah,
sounds good.
let me see how it's.
That's what I was just gonna ask you. I don't know what this is about. Am I staying or not? I'm going. I think you're already a co-host.
I am.
I don't want to remove you as a co-host, so you must already be
Oh,
one.
yeah, I'm the host.
What's your card again? Because I can't remember.
It's the Subaru.
Color?
Red.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I'm leaving.
All right, Keegan, we need you to step out, Keegan.
There should be, is Kelsey out too? Kelsey, was it Kelsey Markowitz or something?